Paul, the Minnesota House took up a bill today that would establish an equal rights amendment that goes well beyond what you might expect an equal rights amendment to cover. KVLY News Team's Quinn Gorham explains why this new bill, if passed, could spark up a very interesting debate for the 2026 election.
So today we are going to make history and move forward with the Minnesota Equal Rights Amendment.
It's been a bill for years, but a proposed Equal Rights Amendment, or ERA, to Minnesota's state constitution finally stands a chance at passage.
I'm really happy to be here because it's been a long journey.
The ERA bill before the House Monday has several additions. The two largest are the inclusion of gender identity and expression in pregnancy outcomes. Put simply, that means the ERA protects members of the transgender community and enshrines abortion rights into the state constitution. Chief author KVLY says the bill builds upon the DFL's work from last year.
We knew that in order to ensure that the work that we did last year would be protected, regardless of who was in office, which party was in power, that those rights would be protected in our state constitution.
But on the other side of the aisle, there are concerns about the new measures. Some say the bill should move forward without provisions for gender and abortion.
Unfortunately, this iteration of the Equal Rights Amendment has really shifted away from providing equal rights to women.
They also say they want to see religion included on the list of protections.
One of those protections that's frankly guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States is equal protection under religion and under religious grounds. And this is going to take that away.
But proponents argue that those protections are already guaranteed in the state constitution.
Religious freedom is already stated explicitly in there, and so putting it again in a spot in which it is already sort of at the highest level protected, it's redundant. It doesn't do anything to that.
If passed by both chambers, the ERA would require ratification by voters on the ballot in 2026. Reporting in St. Paul, I'm Quinn Gorham.
Now, the House and the Senate have had some disagreements on the language for the ERA, even within the same party. Representatives are confident they can strike an agreement with their counterparts with the remaining time left in this legislative session.